And so they just, yeah, Belgium deserved to win. They were incredibly good compared to the U.S. The U.S. team just wasn't on them and deserved to lose. I thought the whole controversy was silly about the player and people arguing they're rooting for the other guy because somebody didn't like some administrative decision. You know, decisions about suspension, I don't follow soccer as much as other sports. I've learned to because of Joy. She's fun, helping me get involved more in international stuff, Tour de France and stuff. I mentioned that the other day. But I know in the NBA, when there's suspensions, the team challenges it regularly, and I know there's a review process in every sport. And so the idea that the U.S. had already challenged the suspension is like, duh, so would every other team. So did every other team. So that's silly. And then blaming it all on Donald Trump. I wonder if people realize how stupid that sounds. I mean, I live in Canada. I'm not even in the U.S. But when I look at the silliness of some of the things going on down south of us, I got to laugh. But it also makes me sad because that means people aren't focused on what's really important. And it seems like, I don't know, sometimes folks have a wildly inflated sense of their own self-importance. Anyway, that leads me to what I want to talk about today, and that is awe. A-W-E, awe, when we stand in awe of something. Now, that word has been misused recently in the last years because people have talked about shock and awe, sometimes in a context of force and military power and whatever, a shock and awe campaign where things are shocked and people are just stunned into silence or inactivity. I don't know. But anyway, today, what I was thinking about is, what about when awe just breaks arrogance, explodes this arrogance? When awe finally breaks arrogance into pieces, because I think we've just, and maybe I'm doing this too, I don't know, but it seems like we've got just an overload of arrogance, of people and groups just thinking, having just a wildly inflated sense of their own importance. You've got groups of people that are convinced that their view of reality and right is just absolutely right, and anyone that doesn't agree with them is either stupid or misinformed or duped or drank some Kool-Aid or whatever. It's not true, folks. You don't have the whole picture. You are not right by default. You do not possess some infinite intelligence. All of us are in the process of learning. Now, the truth is also that all of us have opinions, and even strong opinions. And you know what? Those opinions are 100% right and they're 100% wrong all at the same time. They're 100% right because the set of experiences that we have had in our lives from childhood on up have given us a particular worldview. And you have a worldview. You have a set of lenses through which you see the world. And so do I. So does everybody. And that set of lenses colors every single thing, every event, every word, every thought, everything. And it you cannot be otherwise. Those are the lenses you have. The wise, it seems to me at least, realize that there are lenses. We're not trying to pretend them away. I'm not trying to pretend them away. We have them, and they're colored by everything that we've learned or seen or experienced that we know or think we know. But it seems like the wise people realize those are just lenses, right? And everybody's got some, and everybody's are just as good as yours or just as good as mine. And that humbles me immediately because then that makes me realize your opinion's just good as mine and everybody else's. It seems like the problem comes when we forget that there are lenses and we insist that my lenses are the only lenses and everybody else's somehow infected with wrongness at some level. Anyway, I want to talk not about something that small, because really, in the context of everything, even that distinction is small. We live in a universe. It's been unfolding for eons. Some estimates are 15 billion years, point something. And I saw another one that said that was about half right. And it was more like 26 billion years. And that's depending on, cosmic background radiation, and a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, in that context of a universe that's been unfolding for 15 billion years, we have ideas. And we then get to the point where we believe our ideas are the only way to see things. That's not true. And it sometimes hardens into absolute arrogance. And I want to talk about that arrogance today because, at least my experience is, and I offer you as a suggestion, humility is a much more powerful stance to approach every situation. Now, I'll say sometimes arrogance is really just forgetfulness. We've forgotten scale, the time scales and eternity and grace and interdependence. And then we start pretending that we understand enough to judge everything, to judge others and judge circumstances and judge intent. And people start attacking others based on that myopic understanding. But some arrogance comes from greed or aggrandizement and self-importance masking as fear. Both of those matter, and one is easier to overcome. So today, as I think about with you arrogance, I'm not going to talk about it the way we usually talk about it. Most of the time when we say somebody's arrogant, we mean they're full of themselves. They think they're better than others, or they need to be admired, or they're the smartest person in the room. They need to dominate, impress, or win, or display, or accumulate, or be seen as important. That kind of arrogance is real and it stinks. It causes enormous damage. It can become greed, manipulation, aggrandizement, self-importance, status addiction, and the whole noisy circus of, look at me. But there's another kind of arrogance that may be far more common, and it's quieter and easier to miss. And many of us carry it while thinking we're simply being practical, intelligent, reasonable, or discerning. Like I said earlier, some arrogance is just forgetfulness. We forget eternity. We forget the scale and scope. We forget dependence. We forget how little we actually know. We forget how much we've been given. We forget that breath is not manufactured by ego. We did not invent love. We did not create the gifts that we have. We forget every person we judge is living inside a story we can't see. And when we forget all that, we start pretending we understand enough to judge everything. Now, there's a particular arrogance in thinking our little tiny window is the whole sky, right? We see one little piece of a person, one season of a life, one behavior, one mistake, one political opinion, one spiritual expression, or one failure, or one success, one sentence, one post, one moment, one whatever, and then we make up the whole project. We create a verdict from that. We do it with people. We do it with God. We do it with timing. We do it with reality. We do it with ourselves. We say, this should not have happened, or this should have happened sooner, or they should know better, or I should be further along, or God should have answered differently, or life shouldn't be that way, or this means I failed, or that they're wrong, or I'm not enough, or this proves they are bad. And that's just a few, but there's 1,000 of those. Maybe some of those interpretations have a tiny piece of truth, but our arrogance is the assumption that the piece we see is the whole thing. And that's where this idea of awe comes in, right? Awe breaks the illusion completely that my tiny field of view is complete. Awe reminds me that I'm standing inside a mystery that's too large to control or even begin to explain, or too big to reduce to my favorite opinion. Now, awe is not weakness. It's not standing and just being helpless. It's not anti-intellectual or any of that. It's not refusing to think or abandoning judgment. We still need all that stuff. We need boundaries and laws and consequences, and we need to tell the truth about behavior, responsibility, harm, repair, and all that stuff. But awe changes the posture, seems to me, of the soul. Without awe, discernment becomes, condemnation. Boundaries become superiority. Justice turns into revenge. Confidence becomes ego. Certainty can become violence. Achievement can become self-worship. And even spirituality can turn into some kind of performance theater. Awe says, I will tell the truth, but not pretend that I see everything. Awe says, I'll act with clarity, but not make myself into God. Awe says, I'm going to protect what needs to be protected and build what I need to build and correct what should be corrected while remembering that I'm held by grace. And that's really a different kind of life. So forgetful arrogance, I think, at least my observation, is the kind we fall into most of the time. It's not necessarily malicious, or maybe it's unconscious. We get busy or stressed or hurt or praised or skilled or successful or comfortable in our own explanations. And slowly, without noticing, maybe we start to slip into living as though we're self-created, self-sustaining, self-justified or whatever. We forget the mind we use to judge was given to us. The body we use to act was given to us. The opportunities we call mine were shaped by 1,000 small mercies we didn't control. We forget teachers and parents and ancestors and even strangers and books and divine invitations and second chances and accidents that didn't kill us and consequences that educated us, and moments of grace that we didn't earn. We start talking like we built ourselves from scratch, and awe fixes that. It returns us to proportion. Now, it doesn't make you passive, but it certainly makes you honest. Yes, I worked. Yes, I chose and built and sacrificed, but I was helped. I was carried. I was given breath, gifts, teachers, warnings, mercy, and time. My experience is that remembering softens the heart without weakening the spine. Now, the second kind of arrogance is fear, wearing a crown. This is the harder kind. This is greed, aggrandizement, domination, self-importance, the need to be elevated. That arrogance is often fear, wearing a crown. Fear that underneath I'm really not all that, but I have money, position, and other stuff, so I get to pretend. It's the person who's always got to be admired. Maybe they're usually terrified of being ordinary. I certainly lived that, and that's kind of an imposter syndrome. The person that's always got to be right or always win is sometimes terrified of being unseen. And the control freak is terrified of the uncertain. The person that's got to be superior is often running from a secret belief that they're nothing. That doesn't excuse the damage, but it does explain the mechanism. Now, that kind of arrogance can be a lot harder to overcome because it gives ego a payoff. It does provide status and money and attention and control and some degree of protection and the appearance of strength. Maybe you get rewarded for the very thing that's keeping you from the truth. The applause becomes a prison. The platform is a hiding place. The performance becomes a substitute for presence. And even that kind of arrogance can be broken by awe. And this is maybe the most important part. The first part, unintentional arrogance by forgetfulness, is a reminder. This is a challenge. That rewarded arrogance can be broken by awe, sometimes gently, but most often maybe violently. And I don't mean physical violence, but I mean abruptly, or like in a hard awakening, sometimes through beauty, sometimes through collapse, sometimes through illness or loss or death or catastrophic failure or love, or an encounter maybe with something so real that the costume can't survive. So when awe arrives, it can take many forms. It can arrive under the stars, or in a prayer, or in some music, or on the face of a baby. I've seen people say, I was all this, and the minute I had a kid, everything changed. I looked at that innocent little being and everything. There's awe. And no matter what you were before, that happens. It can arrive beside a hospital bed. It can arrive in the silence after somebody forgives you. It can arrive when you stand at the edge of an ocean or a canyon or under a mountain and remember that your little drama is not the whole story. Awe can also arrive when your life collapses and you discover you weren't in control like you thought. That's painful awe, but it's still awe. Sometimes the mercy is not that everything goes according to plan, but that everything falls apart and that self runs out of fuel. There are moments, and I've walked them, and so have you probably, when life says to you, you cannot carry this illusion any further. Those moments can be brutal, and they can become holy. Those things can either ruin us or refine us, and maybe they ruin us first, and then we can allow them to be the crucible of fire that refines us. When awe comes, arrogance cracks, weakens. Doesn't disappear instantly, maybe, because the ego's a persistent little bugger. But awe introduces a truth the ego cannot fully digest. And it goes like this: I am not the source. I am not the center. I am not the final judge. I am not self-made. I am not God. And then maybe other truth can come immediately behind it that's beautiful. I am also then loved. I am known. I am invited. I am responsible. I am entrusted. I'm called to create. So there's a place where both can exist. And I don't mean that arrogance in the negative sense is something to be aspired to, but prideful, and there's pride in a bad way, but being proud of something you've created, satisfied, deeply rewarded, that's powerful. There's somewhere between there that's not arrogance and not self-loathing, not inflation, but it's also not collapse. And that is pure awe. I call it surrender. In one of my PTAC statements, it says, guided and nurtured through the valley of death, guided and nurtured by God through the valley of death, and those of you that know my history of dying know that that's true, and then refined in fires of surrender, covenant, and perseverance, I have become the ultimate alchemist. Awe lets us be powerful without being puffed up. It lets us be humble without becoming timid. It lets us be successful without getting greedy. And lets us be spiritual without becoming like performance-oriented. It lets us be clear without becoming cruel. And that those distinctions matter because many people think the antidote to arrogance is making yourself small. It's not. The antidote to arrogance is not erasing yourself. The antidote to arrogance is just truth. And the truth is, I am tiny in the scope of eternity, and my choices matter. I am not the center, but I am known fully. I do not understand everything, but I'm still responsible. I have gifts. I did not create them. I have agency, and I did not invent it. I can build, but I must build in remembrance. That isn't weakness. That is pure power. The arrogance shows up most obvious in judgment. It's one of the most ugly places. Not discernment, but judgment. Discernment says, this is healthy, this is harmful. This is aligned, this is not. This is safe, this is dangerous. This is mine to do, this is not mine. Discernment's necessary. Judgment says, I know the whole truth of that soul. Judgment says, I know what they deserve. Judgment says, I know enough to condemn them. Judgment says your worst moment is your identity or my interpretation's final. That's pure arrogance. No one is worthy of my judgment. No one. Everyone deserves my love, compassion, and kindness. It doesn't mean everybody gets access. It doesn't mean everyone gets trust. It doesn't mean consequences vanish, but it means I refuse to sit on a throne that's not mine. Final judgment belongs to God or karma or the universe. My work is truth, love, boundaries, creation, forgiveness, service, ownership. When you combine awe and ambition, awe will purify your ambition. Without awe, ambition becomes hunger for praise or proof or money or status or whatever. Enoughness, more is always more, right? Ambition can build big things, but it often leaves behind wreckage. I've walked that road and left the wreckage. With awe, ambition becomes stewardship. I love that word. I've got a client right now writing a beautiful book. It's done, and we're in the process of, formatting and publishing it. As stewards, we still build and create and grow and expand and make money and, lead and speak and go after big visions. But the energy about that's way different. You're not trying to become God or the divine. You're just trying to use what you were given. That's why I talk about big things, a university, millions of lives, 300 million people, 3,000 millionaires. And I still know none of it is self-glorification if I hold it correctly. If it's ego, it becomes poison. Held in awe, it becomes service. I guess the question's always, what's the fuel? Am I building this to prove myself or building it to serve? I have struggled and fought with that forever because I felt so much like I needed to prove. And I've surrendered that entirely. Not in the sense of abdication, but in the sense of understanding I'm part of an important and larger plan that requires diligence and effort, but is part of beauty and service. Am I trying to be seen, or am I trying to create light that shines for everybody? Am I trying to possess or just be a steward? Am I trying to dominate, or am I trying to liberate? Awe always tells the truth about the fuel, the reason. So today the invitation's simple. Find a place maybe where you have forgotten awe. Maybe you've forgotten it in your work and everything's become a grind and strategy and urgency and pressure. Maybe you've forgotten it in your relationships, and the people around you have roles instead of souls. Maybe you've forgotten awe in your body and you treat it like a machine instead of like a sacred temple. Maybe you've forgotten awe in your money and it's become proof or fear or shame or control or bragging rights. Maybe you've forgotten it in your spiritual life and God's become an idea instead of a tangible living presence. Or maybe you've forgotten awe toward yourself. You know, I said the other day about being a little lower than the angels. Maybe you've reduced your life to your own mistakes or disappointments or obligations. I did that. I'm only as good as whatever the last mistake was. You're a living soul. You're a divine being. You're a human being in motion, in becoming, consciousness and agency and breath. To remember awe, maybe just sit down, slow down, look up, tell the truth, nurture yourself and those around you. Maybe name some things that you didn't create that were given to you. List the things you've been given. Maybe remember slowly and carefully the places where grace has carried you. That's been a really important one for me. Maybe one way to think about it is to name the people you have judged without knowing the story. Maybe it's naming the gift you've been using that you think is yours. And then say thank you as a posture. Arrogance might come from forgetfulness, where we forget scale and eternity and grace. It might come from greed and aggrandizement. Either one can be removed or broken. And the second one might require deeper breaking and more honesty. But in both cases, awe is medicine. Awe does not degrade us. It restores a relative proportion. It doesn't make you weak. It cleans your intention and power. Awe doesn't erase your ambition. It purifies ambition into stewardship. And I love that word. I'm loving it more because of that book. Awe doesn't silence your truth, but it takes out the poison from maybe your certainty or mine. So allow awe to break what needs to be broken. Let it break down the false superiority or the fake throne. Let it break the illusion of self-creation. Let's break the addiction to judgment. And when I say break the illusion of self-creation, I don't mean that you don't create yourself, because you do. But the idea that you alone and not constant grace is what you have access to and is available is just not paying attention. Let awe return and break the idea that your little window is the whole sky. And let it give you back your real life. Small, loved, trusted, capable, also dependent, also at cause, powerful and known. Not the center, not nothing. Not God, but of God or from God. And we're responsible for what we create with the breath that we've been given today. I love you. I've just been reminded of that awe lately, and I invite you to move into that and participate in it just a little more today.